Swadee Krap and welcome to The Tiger. Today we're going to be talking about what's happening over the border in Myanmar. And just to say before we start the report that anything I try and convey in the next 5 minutes or so will be a gross simplification of the problem that is Myanmar and that's been brewing for centuries. So we will try and bring you up to date with the latest of the news in Myanmar, but I apologise for the fact that I can't really get into detail without doing a 10-part mini-series. As the situation in neighbouring Myanmar deteriorates, the flood of refugees continues to flood across the Burmese borders into India, Laos, Bangladesh, China, and the country it shares its longest border, Thailand. Reports of the Thai army sending refugees back into Myanmar have been denied by the Thai PM, although human rights groups maintain that at least 3,000 people have so far been turned back. While the Myanmar army chiefs remain mostly silent against the barrage of world condemnation, the rising surge of ethnic insurgents is now the greatest threat. Myanmar has 134 distinct ethnic groups, a simmering cauldron that's been a major cause for disunity for decades. Some of them are smaller, others much larger, well-armed, well-organised, trained and active. The coup leaders tried to court one of the largest groups, the Arakan Army, who've been fighting on behalf of the Rohingya and the far west of the country, the Rakhine State. Although they've been fighting the Tatmadaw, the Burmese army, since 2009, their bloodiest conflicts against the country's army have mainly occurred since 2016, partly causing the displacement of nearly 1 million people, many spilling into Bangladesh and still living in makeshift refugee camps. The Arakan Army represents some 8,000 troops. Their support of the Burmese majority, their previous foes, is now a major sticking point for the Myanmar army. Coup leaders tried to get them on side by downgrading the status of their organisation, in the eyes of the Burmese military, from terrorist group. The Arakan Army didn't fall for it. Over in the east of the country is another major ethnic group, the Karen National Union, or KNU, some 7,000 to 10,000 soldiers. They've basically controlled the east and south of the country, despite successive military and civilian governments to bring them under control. Since 1948 and independence from the British, the Karen have been in conflict with the majority Burmese. Now the KNU are currently refusing to even ponder talks with the army, saying they demand a commitment to a national unity government first. For now, these two powerful groups are backing the protesters. And then, of course, is Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, until February the 1st this year, the ruling party in an elected government. The 75-year-old still has an enormous emotional sway over the Burmese majority. What the ousted government and voters may lack in actual firepower, they make up in pure heart. There are many more political and ethnic groups around the country. Altogether, in sheer numbers, they'd vastly outnumber the size of the Myanmar army. But can these disparate ethnic gangs, many who have fought each other in the past, galvanise to fight the country's army? To complicate matters, there are now mutinies from the army and police force who have bristled against fighting against fellow Burmese citizens and refuse to take orders. They face execution if caught, but give high-profile succour to the causes railing against the army. But with Aung San Suu Kyi behind bars, there's no single person able to mobilise the forces of opposition to the army's takeover of the government in February. So, for now, the civil unrest will continue and will get worse. But the possibility of a coordinated civil war against the Burmese army and coup leaders seems remote at this time. The protesters' slingshots and rocks are up against grenades, high-power artillery and a coordinated military. Last week, a statement condemning Myanmar's security forces was signed by 12 heads of defence in the following countries: Australia, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Greece, Italy, Japan, Netherlands, New Zealand, South Korea, UK and the US. The joint statement is a rare declaration by senior military commanders from countries around the world. But the statement is merely grandstanding, while the UN and, closer to home, ASEAN do nothing to intervene in the rising conflict.